Good morning, early birds.
Good morning.
Morning.
What's up there, Mr. Wilson?
Good morning.
Hey, Rob, how are you?
Doing well.
We'll see you next week.
You can't stop me, man. Can't be stopped.
Well, Mr. David Holler's on. There we go.
Good morning. How are you?
We're gonna start calling you Papa Holler.
No problem. Sounds good. Can't wait to see you.
Can't wait, brother.
Right. Got a minute or so to go. Before we get started, does anybody have anything, any good success story you want to share with the group that's relevant to our business? Something that you did this week or you observed? Nobody?
Well, I was happy to list the home and put it under contract in 24 hours. That was great.
Oh, where was that?
In Northport. 3-2 at the pool. Went for full ask, 24 hours. And then got an offer accepted in Naples for a buyer. So it was a productive Monday and Tuesday.
Well, I listed a house on Friday and got 3 offers on it and a backup contract by Monday.
Look at you, Ivy.
In
Kick your ass.
Plano, Texas. That's what happens when you list it right.
That's right. It's so important. So many overpriced listings, and agents continue to accept that we should lower the price in 2 weeks. And I just keep saying, you got to stop that mentality.
Yeah,
It's like,
you got that. Exactly.
it's just going to hurt the seller and keep you on the market longer and sell for less, as we all say over and over.
Yeah, that's right. And the longer it stays on the market in our area, prices continue to go down. And so the seller just gets further and further away from true market value.
Absolutely. Great to see some of our agents in Dallas and Plano come on as well. Ivy, Monica, Pamela, good morning.
Right?
Good morning.
Good morning. Vicky thought it was only 9 o'clock, so she's on her way to her computer.
Love it.
Wonderful. So you know what? This mastermind was kind of inspired by the Remax marketing, where it has the Remax logo and it says "Most Trusted in Real Estate." Any of you ever seen those around, right? And to me, that has a lot of significance, and it also has a lot of responsibility to be, the most trusted. And what makes us trusted? Just out of curiosity, like what do you think gives our clients and the public trust in us?
Good communication.
Good communication.
We're the
What
home of
else?
the top producer.
Home of the top producer.
Honesty.
Integrity.
Doing what you say.
Remax also has a reputation for having agents that have been in the business much longer. We normally don't have a lot of newer agents, so I think that helps build trust is longevity.
And I think that, that is a historical observation, but I'm going to go on the record here saying that, there are a lot of skills, there are a lot of things that we did 100 years ago that we can't do now. And the reason why we can't do them now is because they're crafts and they were handed down from generation to generation, right? And if we no longer, do these crafts, and I really can't think of one off the top of my head, but you can't just go and replicate something that the craft is lost. And us being the most trusted, the most respected, and most experienced in the business, we need to help the business continue and mentor the next generation underneath us, like we were given the benefit of when we started. I think having a good mentor is probably one of the most important things to predictive success. Having somebody that cares and calls you out and gives you some finer points. It's like a sports coach. Not that I'm a Patriots fan, but you had the guy Bill Belichick won what 7 out of 15 Super Bowls. Patrick Riley with winning the championship for the Bulls, and I think then he went to the Heat and did it. Can't just say, hey, we're the most experienced, we've been around. We have an obligation to kind of share that trade with the next generation. And there's also a saying, which I'm a huge, huge believer of, which is when you teach, you learn. Like when you teach, you improve your own game, right? So when you think you're giving to somebody, you're really upping your game, right? You're improving your skill set because you need to compartmentalize it. You need to be able to succinctly explain how that process goes. And in the process of explaining to somebody, it's truly a gift to you. Has anybody ever experienced that? Like you're trying to teach a team member and then you realize that makes you much better?
Absolutely. I was just thinking about an instance with Whitney, an agent on my team, and now seeing her looking for a hotel for a buyer. Before she was a new agent, she was just learning the contract, and then all of a sudden she's like, I want to go to a commercial event, and then I took her to the Remax Commercial Symposium, and now a year and a half later, she's getting a buyer referral for the biggest thing of her career, and every time I talk to her, I feel like I give her something and she gives me something back. So pouring into others and teammates is huge. Absolutely. We're always learning by giving.
Yep. So teaching is truly a gift to us, to the teacher, and not just a sacrifice for the student or a gift to them. We really do benefit from it. If you wanted to kind of break down, I'm going to talk a lot about communication style, but I think I want to talk before that about, what the goal is. And it's not a manipulation. The goal is, we're not going to mislead. We're not going to trick clients. We're honest people who are looking for relationships and conversations and business that will be a little bit easier because we build a high level of trust in the relationship. So the core pillars of trust, if you really break them down, is obviously honesty, which I think is probably a pretty good synonym to trust. But transparency goes hand in hand with honesty, right? And that means that we have the courage to tell people the absolute truth, maybe in a way that they can digest it, but we can't candy coat the truth. I know, David, your part of Florida is probably seeing some of the bigger declines because it had such tremendous migration there, and some segments of the market it's not good news, right? But if you don't tell them, it gets to be worse news.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I just spoke on Fox 4 the other day, and all of a sudden now we're starting to see some foreclosures, but they're going to get picked up and they're going to be scooped up fast. And we are starting to see the market change, and a lot of things are finally, coming around. And but it was a pretty crazy year, trying to get everybody to come to reality. And honestly, things went up too much and too fast, and a lot of people just truly needed that hand holding and the education and extra time to hear it and realize that they need to be more realistic. But it's getting better.
And David, it's like a physician, right? If they're telling you, look, at your blood pressure is high, your diet's not great, and you need to exercise, those are all hard messages that you need to tell a patient. But if you don't tell a patient that, you don't give them the news, the outcome's not going to be good, right?
Yeah, I think it's those those agents like a very seasoned doctor that is just very comfortable sharing a hard message the agents that are winning are the agents that are a little bit more experienced or that have a good mentor, like we talked about, and who can deliver the hard truth as soon as possible. And, just helping the newer agents on the other side of the deal too will really help the transaction move forward faster. And, that's what we're here for.
And David, so many of the audience here is in the business because I think they love to help people and they like real estate, right?
Oh, 100%.
And, we need a better process to be able to serve them better, right? Because if you look at, if you had and we use the example of like a surgeon with a new procedure that can save lives, right? If they can do 2 surgeries a day, they save 2 people's lives. If they can do 4, they can save 4 people's lives, right? Especially if they were the only person that really knew how to do it. They have a moral obligation, in my opinion, to help as many people as they can, right? I'm sure they're going to make a lot of money, but beyond money, you have a duty and an obligation to help people. And in this industry, there is a lot of mediocrity, right? I mean, if you look around, there are a lot of people that aren't committed to the business, that aren't possessing the skills necessary to help get the outcome that you want, right? So you don't want to hire a doctor to do a sophisticated medical procedure that watched it on a YouTube video, do you?
Never.
You want to hire somebody that is a proven, has integrity, and knows how to get the job done. And we can be the best advocates, but if we don't have the trust or the communication strategy to build the trust, okay, it limits the amount of people that we can serve, right? And if we can't help enough people, or if the people that we're helping don't take the right action, and they might not take the right action, not because we don't give them good information, but they might not take the right action because we haven't communicated it to them correctly.
Rob, can I add something?
Go ahead, Wilson.
Yeah, so I actually had this conversation with a recruit yesterday, and I equated it back to the 8 years that I spent as an EMT. And when I had my license as an EMT, if I came upon an accident and I wasn't working, I had an obligation to stop, pull over, and help. And the reason I had an obligation to do that is I also had that obligation to have the right tool bag in my truck. And that was I had my gauze, my bandages, my whatever I needed. It was my crash bag. And I equated it to real estate as your crash bag in real estate is the bare minimum of the steps. Taking the right classes, involving yourself in current matters of real estate, attending your CE classes, but going above and beyond. And that's what separates us versus other agents, is that we go on these Zooms. We are always trying to find that further education that lets us have our crash bag prepared for when the crash happens and somebody needs us. We have that moral obligation to help, just like the medical profession, and it's where RE/MAX agents are able to jump, and it's not a blind jump into, okay, how are we going to do this? It's, I have the right tools to be successful for you as my client, give you the best experience in the easiest manner possible.
Yep. And and sometimes, Wilson, consumers have a tendency to take instinctual reactions instead of deliberate or intentional reactions, right? And the best example that I can give you is, a home seller who has a bias to overpricing their house because they believe that there's a correlation, there's a positive correlation to the ask price and the sale price.
Yeah.
Right. And they also have a fundamental belief, Wilson, that, you're going to come here and tell me to sell it low because it makes your job easier. Right. Do you think some homeowners might think that, Wilson's going to come and tell me to list my house lower so it'll be an easier job and make a quick sale and more money?
Absolutely.
Right. I see, Alina, you're shaking your head too, right? You see that a consumer can think that you're just telling them that because it's in your best interest to make your job easier.
My father used to say that all the time before I was in real estate. Oh, they're just trying to get it at a price that they can move it faster. So it's just old school thinking.
Right, so, but in reality, you know, and, you know, having the privilege to get to know so many of us on this call here, I know that, you know, sometimes we even negotiate to our own personal detriment to serve the client. You know, I've seen you all be selfless in doing that. But the client is going to be left to their own conclusion if we don't have the right communication strategy, right? So they're going to say, oh, Lena just wants me to list it low so she can make a quick sale and cash that commission check. But we need to reframe it so that it's in the context of what's the best interest of the client, right? And when we reframe this, and my North Star is, you know, there's no transaction worth my reputation, right? And, you know, if we bring you in as a client, we want you to end the relationship more favorably than you entered it, right? We don't want to have you say, oh, you know, it was a difficult transaction. And sometimes we get confused with transparency, right? Did you ever hear the agent, you know, telling somebody, oh, I solved this problem, I solved that problem, this happened, I fixed this for you, right? And they're going on and on and on. And the client is just zoning it out because it's just noise to them, right? I don't want to know, you know, what the doctor had to do to solve the problem to save my life. I just want to know that it went well, right? I don't need to know all the details. And if we're going explaining details to somebody that doesn't require any action, I just think we're like stroking our own ego and hurting the client, right? Because who's ever had a transaction where there were no issues? I don't think there's ever been one in real estate that went with no issues, right? And sometimes, you know, without intent, we think that we're endearing ourselves to the client by telling them all the problems that we solved. But do you think that really helps? I don't. I mean, I think that just, you know, to me, I don't know. I'm not sure what that how I feel about that, but I know I don't think it's necessary unless there's a problem that we need to solve. Like, I don't need to give you all the details. Oh, the appraisal was coming in low. I gave him extra comps. I got it fixed. I'm a hero. You should love me. No, I mean, that's just another day at the office, right? The other agents, you know, other agents not doing their job. I had to do their job. You know, the best professionals, they're not even saying that. They just make it seem it's a seamless transaction, right? There's no interruption. There's no anxiety. Everything just flows. Okay. Reliable, you know, here's something where we could probably do better as an industry in the trust game, right? Instead of telling them all the things that we do, we should be more succinct and more responsive instead of doing narratives about problems that we solved and avoiding the calls that need to be made and when they need to be made if decisions need to be made. And then the second piece of this is, you know, trust is built by trust really isn't built by what we do. Okay, you know what trust is built by? Who can think next level? Trust can be lost by actions that we do, but trust isn't really built by what we do. Trust is built by how we make them feel. Does that make sense? Right? I mean, you can do everything right, but if we don't make you have that feeling, then trust is it's not maximized, right? We're not at that level where we've built that incredible level of trust because we're congruent with our actions.
I think if you follow through on your commitments, they're going to feel the trust, and then you know that stays with them, and they're going to refer you clients and family and feel good about it.
Yeah, I think you just have to be natural. I mean, you be yourself, be honest with them. You know, I've learned that over the years of being in real estate. If you're honest and you're sincere about what you're saying to them, I think they'll trust you better.
So Ron, are there any honest, trustworthy broke real estate agents?
Yeah, I think there are.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to say that that doesn't mean that's what you need to do, but being honest and trustworthy, you know, if you have a communication strategy where, like, if I was the most trustworthy person, but I had like a nervous tick and I kept saying, and you got to try, like, you could put out signals that are going to make it the exact opposite is going to be the emotional connection, right? And you probably could have, you know, people that are less trustworthy, but more manipulative that can try to build trust because they're using the communication style to manipulate instead of to serve. Okay. So what I wanted to connect here, Ron, is I want to connect the people that are honest, deserve trust to the strategies that will convey that to your clients. And it's almost like, you know, if I say to you, hey, Ryan, you know, trust me, this is what we need to do. And I don't know if it's just me or if it's anybody else. Like if you feel like me and somebody says, trust me, like, do you like almost avoid trusting somebody, or are you like saying, why are they saying that? If you're in that camp, raise your hand. So it looks like more than half the people. And I almost feel like if you have to say, trust me, there's some reason why I wouldn't trust you, right? And maybe that's just my logical side.
You probably take that out of your vocabulary when you're talking to clients.
It's like when
Yep.
people say, honestly, I'm going to tell you something.
Just be yourself. Be yourself. Be honest. I mean,
Yeah.
tell
Alina,
the
can I be
time.
honest? Alina, can I be honest with you? It means what? You weren't honest with me before?
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of silly when you think about it, but there are a lot of people that, you know, will never do anything wrong, completely honest, but lack the communication process that, you know, there's barriers to the trust that they're able to build because they don't have the proper communication process. So I'm gonna get right into the meat and bones of it. You know, trust can be built by the communication, and one of the ways that you can build trust is through a strategic pause. Instead of saying or you know, if you ever been in an appointment where there's like a awkward silence, okay, that should be comforting to you, not air that needs to be filled with ums and ahs and okay, because if you're saying that, you're sending a signal that's inconsistent, you know, with where your integrity is. Okay. We often think that the outcome is dependent upon the client. And in reality, the outcome is dependent upon us. And not everybody is the same, but everybody needs to be, we need to read the room and be able to process how we can engage them and build trust. Right? So a strategic pause is incredible because, you know, it kind of pushes the client to maybe come clean with some thoughts that they had that they might not have shared with you. Controlled pacing, right? If you are, you know, full of knowledge, right, and you want to get all that information out there, and Gary Greenacre, if I'm talking to you really quickly and say, hey, Gary, you know, I saw a lot of homes here, you know, we really need to get this pricing right, we need to do that. My message could be the same, but how does it make you feel if I'm like talking real quick?
You're rushing me, wanting me to make a decision.
Do I come across as maybe being a little bit nervous?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I don't come across as being authentic, right? So, you know, having a strategic process, like the strategic pause, you know, and when somebody says something foolish, right, we feel like we have to counter that, right? But, you know, Miguel, you're doing a lot of recruiting. You know, you might want to say something like, that's interesting. What makes you feel that way? And you kind of take that monkey off your back. And I'm like, Miguel, why do you feel that way? right? And now they have to defend it. Okay, and it's not, again, it's not a manipulation. This is all about building trust.
I think
This
it goes
is
the other way around too. And I usually equate it to when people ask you a question, it's not important that you immediately answer the question if you have to put some thought into it, because then you sound like you're kind of winging it. It's kind of like being in court. You know, if somebody asks you a question and it's just a yes or no question and your answer is yes, just say yes. You don't have to always come up with some reason for your answer unless they want to know the reason. So sometimes we have a tendency to talk too much. Like you said, only talking so fast, they just want to, their reaction is fight or flight.
Yeah. Something that's kind of worth writing down here as a group is, and this is pretty universally acknowledged, but communication is 93% nonverbal. Communication is 93% nonverbal. Okay, and it sounds like really ridiculous and crazy, but it couldn't be truer, right? Because I can give Beth, I can give you a series of words to say, I can give Ivy and Ron, and depending on how you deliver that, we're all going to come away with a different impression and a different feel, a different vibe, a different trust level or distrust level. Would you agree? So the first step is realizing that not what you say. So memorizing scripts and understanding how to answer questions doesn't get you to the finish line. It doesn't really build trust unless you learn how to communicate and deliver that message. Okay, you know, volume control, you know, being the authority and talking like an authority without being arrogant. Okay, there's a fine line there, right? Like if I said, you know, Beth, how dare you question me? I know what's going on in Scott's. Like that's not going to build trust, right? But if I said, hey, can you tell me why you feel that way? And can I share with you an example why I think it might not be? And what's your thought about that?
Absolutely,
Right?
please share.
A different process to address it. You know, body language, right? Very important. How you carry yourself, right? Facial expressions, eye contact. I think a lot of people, like if you don't have the appropriate level of eye contact, you can be doing everything right, but that alone can destroy trust. I mean, does anybody dispute that? Like, you ever have a conversation where somebody's not making good eye contact? How does that make you feel?
Like you can't trust them.
It makes you feel there's something off, right?
Yeah, they don't care.
Yeah.
Well, they're not giving you the attention you deserve.
Yep. Or why aren't they looking at me? They're hiding something, right? That doesn't feel right. And even, you know, gestures and movements, right? You're being a little bit automated. Like, so why would you, like, you can use your hands, you have to be authentic. You know, you have to have a style that is consistent. You need to have an energy, right? Because I think, you know, people who don't deserve trust, you know, probably, you know, they pitch up, you know, there's an awkwardness to them. And I think many of us, you have been around a lot of people and a lot of salespeople that, you know, don't deserve trust. And they put out a lot of signals and warning signals, right? And we get an impression when we meet them, right? Sometimes, you know, we say our gut instinct's usually good, but a lot of times they give up their hand by the way that they communicate, right? If you don't look me in the eye, you know, I'm thinking that, you know, there's something that's not completely true, right? Why are you staring the other direction? You know, the energy that you bring into a room, the enthusiasm, the excitement, you know, that builds trust with authentic. How do I feel about an agent who asks questions and the seller doesn't respond and ignore? It's a great question, Ivy. What I think that tells us is that we haven't built rapport, right? We thought we had rapport, but we haven't because they're not fully engaged. And again, you know, Ivy, this might be an agent that comes in and says, you know, I did everything that you told me, and the seller wasn't paying attention. They weren't listening, right? And you're making it about the seller, but in reality, it's always about us, right? Because we weren't picking up the signals, and now we're blaming the seller. So when that seller overprices a property, or when that buyer, you know, doesn't take action on the perfect home, whose fault is it? Whose fault is it?
Ours.
Yeah, it's ours, right? It's the agent's fault because, you know, we don't have the awareness. We haven't built the trust, you know, to go that next level deep, right? It's our fault. And this is probably, I mean, these are all, any one of these can be a showstopper, so they're all kind of important. But, you know, the last part about master communication and trust building, in my opinion, is active listening, right? Now, if you've ever been at an appointment or talked to somebody, right, and you just explain something, then they ask you the question back again, how does that make you feel?
And do your job.
Right? I mean, like I'm telling you, you know, this is how I feel, right? And then 2 minutes later, you're asking me a question that's basically asking me the same thing, showing me that you weren't listening. Question, I'm not listening to you, right? And then 3 questions later, I'm asking you the question that you already told me. I mean, you might even disqualify me at that point, which you probably should, right?
Either you're not listening or you're disrespectful.
Yeah. So, and then in terms of context, you know, even taking it the next level deeper, you know, for, you know, our all components of trust, right? Some other ways that I believe that we can build trust and you know, I'm not a big proponent of, you know, going deep into these type of conversations that I don't think have relevance, right? And I've seen agents go out to somebody's house and say, oh, you know, your kid went to Union Catholic, my kids went there, and they try to build trust by commonality, right? And they go overboard with that. To me, that kind of seems like you're trying to create a likeness, you know, to build trust without having the, you know, the skills to do it the correct way. Do you know what I mean? And I don't know if you ever felt like somebody's tried to use that, you know, oh, you know, I have a boxer dog and you have a boxer dog. That, well, why should that have any relevance to me hiring you, Nicole, as my real estate agent? Doesn't mean anything, right? So, you know, active listening, reflecting back, you know, active listening also helps us uncover things that people aren't willing to discuss, right? You know, has anybody ever listed a house that probably shouldn't have been listed, right? Where the seller wasn't committed to selling, right? Did anybody ever work with a buyer that was not going to buy and wasted your time? And I see Alexa shaking her head. Alexa, how did that make you feel when you were on either one of those transactions? The buyer that wasn't ready to buy or the seller that wasn't committed to selling?
I made a huge mistake. for myself if I fall into that category and I wasted my time. That's how I feel. That's how I feel.
Right.
Sometimes it doesn't bother me because it's a learning experience, or it jumps you to another angle. Maybe their best friend or their parent will buy instead. So it builds a referral basis. You know, even sometimes if you are wasting your time or you're taking someone out to show a house you know they're never going to buy, it sometimes builds that rapport and networks you into other areas.
And Pamela, sometimes it's a lesson to us on what we need to do differently, right? Because I remember an agent who, put like this loyalty in listening to whatever the client wanted.
What the heck happened here?
This was her North Star, but they were allowing the client to take a failed process and then feel like they're a victim because they never got the outcome that they wanted. And that's because the communication wasn't there and the trust wasn't there to ask the questions, right? Like, like if they lost 4 houses because they weren't bidding competitively, right? They're like, oh, this is a tough market. The sellers are unreasonable, right? You could have that outcome. Or you can go back, Pamela, and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Client, why do you think we've lost 4 transactions in a row? Tell me, why do you think that happened?
That's
right? And then you ask some better questions.
It's all your fault.
It makes you want to ask for a retainer fee every time you take a list.
Absolutely. Non-refundable.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
So Beth, Beth, I have a completely different outlook on that. I'm glad you brought that up because you know what? It's on like I personally.
Hey guys, let's mute ourselves if you're not talking.
Okay, I'm gonna mute everybody here.
Yeah, it's all right.
So Beth, I'm gonna say that, and if you want to unmute yourself, I'm gonna say that if that happens, okay, a retainer fee would not satisfy me. Number one is like I would feel like it was ill-gotten gain for me. That's just who I am.
Back and forth.
I would say it was on me. I would say it's on me because I didn't understand enough as to why that seller wasn't motivated or the buyer wasn't motivated. Okay. And the retainer gives you a false sense that there's a commitment. But there could be an issue where they're not comfortable and they may walk away from the retainer and everybody loses there. Okay.
There has been one instance where I did say I was going to charge a retainer and they wanted to do an exclusive agency instead of an exclusive right to sell. So that if they found the buyer, then they would, this was a over $1 million listing that they, in the past too, where that was almost unheard of. But where they basically expected me to do all these different types of marketing, which would cost me a fortune. But if they found the buyer, then they would owe me nothing. And so I said, I will do that. However, I need you to put up a $3,000 retainer fee that will be non-refundable. And then I'm willing to do all the marketing on the property. And they're like, well, we're not going to do that. And I said, well, then I'm not going to do your listing. I mean, they were really, really difficult to work with. And so I did that because it was like, okay, I'm going to see if they can put their money where their mouth is, so to speak. And, they weren't willing to do that. They wanted me to pay for everything, but they wanted to actively find their own buyer.
Right.
So I wasn't willing to take that risk. It's like, and by the way, they ended up in foreclosure later. So it was kind of a karma thing, but that's a whole different story.
So, a master at that, Beth, can kind of thread a needle, and it's a very fine needle. But like I've been there where I've asked people, what type of work do you do? And kind of go down that direction and connect the dots where they understand where I'm coming from, right? Without like without like making it all about me in that case, right? I'm like, oh, what type of work do you do? Oh, you're an engineer, so you do field work, right? You know, would you do, you know, $12,000 worth of engineering work, and if the buyer decide not to buy, write that off? No, because you've done all the work, right? Now, how does that? I'm just help me out here, because I'm going to do all the work, and if somebody sees my sign and comes and buys it with you directly, like, would that make any sense? Right? So that's a communication pattern interrupt that I believe that, you know,
Yeah.
more times than not you can win. But when we make it about ourselves, right, it's harder to defend it when if we can connect it to something that's in their life, right? It'll be easier.
Exactly. And they were both self-employed, so that's what I did. And then they're just like, well, then I guess we're not doing business. That was after it's like, unless we do this, I can't take your listing. Not that I won't, I just said I can't. Because I'm in business for myself, just like you're in business for yourself. And you wouldn't want to do all the work and not get paid. That's not exactly how I said it. That was a long time ago, so.
But Beth, if
Shooting
you
from the
think,
hip on that.
but Beth, if you think the marketing value is $3,000, but what about your time, not just for them and this listing, but the years of experience that got you to this point where you're ready to have the conversation and take on a listing like that and build that.
Right. And I
That's what
pulled the $3,000 out of the air when I was giving that example. But yeah, I mean, we have a lot of experience and a lot of value. That's not that hard dollar.
Right, but
Absolutely.
explaining that in a way that makes them feel that they get your 20 years or 30 years or 40, however long you've been in the business. I think that's where a lot of agents, they stop and they fall a little short. And I think if they could explain that value or that experience, and it's like, you know, this week when I sold something in 24 hours, it took me so many years to prepare to be in that position to do that. It's not something that happens every day. Most of my listings take 2 months, right? Or 3 months or however long. This year, it's been crazy. Some listings take 6 months, 8 months. We've had a challenging year, but I don't feel bad, or, you know, I'm not like, listen, let's wait for more buyers. This is going to be the buyer. We're going to go under contract. I just think that a lot of times we sell ourselves short. And just to remind yourself, you've been doing this for so long, and that you have a lot of credibility, and just make sure that they're, you know, informed about that.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because there are people who actually will have a rebuttal to that. And it's like, well, so-and-so sold this house in 2000 or 2001, and it, you know, had multiple offers. Why can't you do that? So it's kind of being able to explain not just the market, but the value. And it's like, well, we had this brand new agent who sold it, you know, yesterday, even though it went on the market today, kind of thing. So I think that explaining that value and putting it so they can actually hold that value. But I would love to hear what you and Rob both have to say about that rebuttal with, well, 4 years ago, you know.
Well, in a good market, anybody can write a contract. You know, a lot of what people would call people that got their license in the pandemic an order taker, right? But what are they doing today? What's their business look like? How many listings are they, you know, getting ready to put on the market in January? Do they have a business plan? Do they really have a idea what they're going to make in 2026? I think that you just really have to, I would role play with somebody in your office that you get along with, and just focus on this topic, you know? That, for me, that would be great.
And Beth, I might even have the conversation about some of the things that we talk about, which is, you know, Beth, I'm glad you brought that up, but, you know, we've transitioned from a momentum market to a skills market. Okay, so, you know, whether you hire me or somebody else, these are the questions I would be asking. I'd be asking, you know, can you give me an example? You know, anybody can sell the easy transaction. Can you tell me about a transaction that you were able to overcome a failed prior relationship, right? And maybe have a case study, right? Say, hey, you know, the Joneses over here in Gilbert, you know, that their house expired twice. You know, we met, we talked about a strategic repositioning, you know, and we got them sold in 47 days with 2 offers. I think that's how I would address that, right? Where it's not talking about conjecture, right? And, You know, if you even talk about like, hey, when I'm hiring somebody, this is what I would look for, right? And you're not saying I'm the right person, but then when they ask you those questions, you better have the right answer, right? So my diagnosis is a lot of times when we have difficult clients, it's really about, you know, setting the right expectations through proper communication and communication that builds consistent trust, right? And I hate when I talk about things in my own experience, but I just try to do this because I really want you to get an insight into how sometimes things work, right? And you know, if you've been on these masterminds for years, you probably heard this story 2 or 3 times. But you know, our chief commission processor, financial guy Ricardo, is living in a house because of communication, not because of he had the best offer. It was in 2021, crazy market, and I can tell you straight up that he got that house because I built rapport and trust with the listing agent over a phone call. Okay. And I don't know how you calculate the value of that, but you know, he lost multiple offers. And you know, my call was authentic. It was true. You know, first of all, I believed everything I said to him, and I'm like, hey, you know what? This may not be the best offer, but I can tell you that, you know, we'll perform, we'll communicate, and it will be a smooth transaction, right? And, you know, that was the beginning of the relationship that sparked the transaction. Okay. And it wasn't, you know, and customers have no idea about that, right? You know, they just think a number's a number, right? I mean, how many times do you ever even, you know, show a customer like, look, you know, I had a listing, we had 11 offers on it. Only 2 people actually called me, and only one of them were all the blanks in the contract filled out correctly, right? So as your advocate, this is what I'm going to do if I'm the listing agent. And if I'm a buyer's agent, I just want you to know about how I'm going to help you get the same offer accepted that would not get accepted with 10 out of 11 agents. Right? Now, isn't that true? Like, you could have a really good offer, but if the agent doesn't call you and it's put in your inbox, it might even go into your spam, right? But how pathetic is that that happens? And the public has no idea. None.
That's very important, Rob. That's very important. When I see a contract come in, if there's, you know, loose ends, I give it right back to them. I tell them, listen, I'm not going to present this until it's complete. All the information has to be there. Even if they tell me, hey, let the attorneys fix it. Nope. It's got to be complete before I present it, because, you know, it shows who I'm going to be working with. You know,
Yeah.
if they're right off the bat having an incomplete contract, then, you know, how's that deal going to go?
Right. And you can create parallels, Zeke, because you could be like, you know what? There might be a really good attorney, personal injury attorney, that has his own shingle, his own private practice. And then there's, you know, Morgan and Morgan that's won billions of dollars, right? If I'm an insurance defense attorney and I see, you know, Zeke Elliott, private practice attorney, suing the insurance company versus Morgan and Morgan that's beat us out of billions of dollars, I'm going to be a little bit more concerned about Morgan and Morgan because of the reputation, right? And the same is true about agents. You know, if you see somebody and they're making an offer and they've had no sales, right? How many of us look at whether an agent's done any business before you entertain an offer, right? Now, does the customer know that agents do that? Probably not, right? They don't know that they just think, oh, I have a good offer and my cousin's, I'm going to buy through my cousin, right? Well, you know, Beth, when somebody presents an offer, the first thing I do is I look at how much business they did, and I look at that as a prediction as to how likely this transaction is to close. And I'm not saying you shouldn't work with your niece. Obviously, they need to get started somewhere. But how would you feel if you lost the perfect house because the agent saw that your niece hadn't done a deal yet? How's that for a mic drop moment, right? And it's a mic drop moment because it's true, right? And even if the person, even if you didn't look up that they didn't do any transactions before, right? When you get an offer from somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, Zeke, can you sense that they have no idea what they're doing? This is their first deal when they call you,
Absolutely, definitely.
right? I mean, you can smell it a mile away. You're like, I am not going to get you your PhD in real estate testing it on my seller, right? I'm going to take the sure thing. I'm going to take Wilson's offer because Wilson's done 11 deals and we've done 2 together, right?
Well, I mean, that's not always the case, to be honest. I had a deal earlier in the year. It was a brand new agent that made the offer that got the listing. Well, I'm sorry, I had the listing. He had the right buyer, and he was honest. He was like, "Listen, I've been 2 months in the business." He was with a big team, which I'm sure she trains him correctly, but he did everything right, and I was actually impressed because of the way he worked. So it's kind of not always that way. A lot of times, I think most times it is, but in this instance, it wasn't. And I had to guide him a couple of times, but at the same time, I could tell that he was on the right track.
So Zeke, what you're doing is you're kind of reinforcing what I'm talking about because that person had the right communication strategy to overcome the shortcoming.
Yep.
But if that person had no transactions and no communication skills, right? And you smell that this is going to be a problem, right? Oh, I didn't know I needed to fill that out. I don't know where to get this information to complete it correctly. You're like, no, I'm not gonna risk a transaction because we know if you go under contract and it falls apart in 3 weeks, you've damaged, you now have a biased listing, right? Because people are going to wonder why did it go under contract and cancel, right? Was there something wrong with the house? Was there a bad home inspection? Now it's built up days on the market. So there's consequences to everything. And I think, the statement about a brand new agent, your brand new agent overcame it by having an effective communication strategy with you. Would you agree?
Yep.
Right? It's kind of like the old, I don't know, was it one of the car companies, maybe it's Avis, saying we're not number one, but we try harder, right? Like that was an effective message, right? You're going to get better service because we care.
Zeke mentioned something which the agent was on a team and he knew that the team leader was probably very responsible and a good educator. And that says a lot as well, because if they just are a solo agent at a firm running around, can't reach their broker, it might have been a different story for that closing. It might have fallen apart.
And I knew I could call her because I knew her and I would say, hey, I'm helping this guy out. And he's, I was confident in that aspect.
Yeah.
I just got an offer and I called the girl's broker. Somebody on this call, somebody just said Alexa wrote that she checks to see if their license is active. I mean, there's a lot of funny things that go on in this industry. And I mean, calling the broker, checking the license, I wouldn't put it past any of us. I mean, you gotta know who you're talking to. So
it's a pretty low standard. And it's sad that you have to look to that, but it's possible that some of them might not even be actively licensed or kept up with their credits. Communication. I also believe that consumers have missed the benefit, and they've only missed the benefit because we don't have an effective strategy for communicating it on our reputation and negotiation skills, right? Because I can almost guarantee if all 64 of us on this call put together a contract for the exact same amount with the same down payment, the same pre-approval letter, and presented it to the theoretical listing agent, the outcome's not going to be the same because it's the same offer. It's going to be different because of the way that we communicate it, the way we build a relationship. Right?
I'd like to add something. I think that you work as a team with the other agent. And I believe in trusting each other and working together. If something doesn't work out, you ask the other one, what do you think? What would you do? And especially when you're working with a new agent, I don't judge them. I mentor them and I help them. And it's kind of nice because many times they'll do it my way.
Mhm.
So that helps. But I do believe in teamwork and cooperation because we represent the seller. Our job is to sell that house. We are just a facilitator.
And in many cases, when you have a newer agent, you might say, hey, you know what? I really don't think this number is going to work. Like, how much room does your client have? And they'll inappropriately tip their hand, and we have an unfair advantage because of our experience, right? We have integrity. We're not going to be dishonest, but
Right.
if we ask them and they volunteer it, that's our duty as a advocate for our seller.
Interesting that you say that, because if you actually pick up the phone and call them and ask questions, they are 99% more likely to give answers that they probably shouldn't give.
Yep. But I hope this gives us a little bit of insight. And I feel like the last 4 or 5 of our masterminds are shifting us away from being victims of the market or the client and looking at it and saying that, you know what, it's on us, right? Our outcome is on us. If you ever looked at a top performing agent in your marketplace, and maybe it's even looking at in the mirror at yourself, and you consistently produce results, it's because we don't play the blame game, right?
Exactly.
We're accountable for the outcome. It's not the buyer's agent, it's not the listing agent, it's not the client, right? It's us. Okay, it's the way that we manage the relationship through communication. Okay, those buyers that are unsuccessful, that have been lurking for 9 months and come out every 2 months, we say, oh, that's a looky-loo, that's a tire kicker, right? Maybe there's some of those, but I think the majority of them are ones that are fearful, and they just haven't had a good person to lead the transaction to a successful outcome, right? And I really hate when the industry has, oh, buyers are liars, they say silly things like that, right? But that's only because it's a defense mechanism because we failed.
Not
Right?
always. Not always.
You say buyers are liars?
A lot of them are, unfortunately.
And
it's not because of me. I mean, I've seen it. I've heard a lot of stories.
So Zeke, imagine you're a criminal detective, or you're a trial attorney. Like, you learn ways to understand where people are misleading you, right? You have enhanced skills. And I think it's a lot of that's on us asking the right questions and not just blindly taking what they're putting out there.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah, I also think sometimes buyers just don't know what they want. I mean, they may tell you one thing because on Monday they think they want a 2-bedroom. On Friday, they may realize they need a 3-bedroom. So we need to really go with the punches and, work their journey with them.
Or better yet, Alina. So if they're looking for a 3-bedroom, say, hey, would a 2-bedroom with a den work? We ask more questions, right, to go a little bit deeper, right? Because I'm sure on this call we've had people who say, hey, I'm going to be buying in a year, right? And you kind of put the slow process on, where you're like, yeah, I'm going to keep in touch with them once a month. And then you call them in month 2 and they're like, oh, great news, we're under contract. And I've heard this call before. Oh, great news, we're under contract. And you know what, Nicole, it's with a RE/MAX agent. Aren't you happy?
Yeah, but the worst part is that sometimes they're under contract and they'll still ask you questions on what you have to do. At that point, I'm like, well,
That's
so
right.
you guys have an agent already. So, no, not to be rude, but talk to your agent.
Right, but and Nicole might go and say, boy, that person misled me. They said I'm buying in a year, and then they bought right away. And again, honestly, I think that's on us. And I don't mean to be harsh, but like, we're not victims of anything. Like, and when that happens, Zeke, I don't get angry. I call it a learning lesson, right? It's an experience to learn from, right? Because there's a intuition that we need in this business beyond just writing down what they say. And when somebody says, I'm going to be buying in a year, that may be what they believe, right? But then they're driving around on a Sunday and they go to an open house and they don't give your card out, and then they wind up buying from somebody else. We say, boy, that person was a jerk. Well, no, because we didn't run them through the system, right? Hey, if you're going to be buying in a year, then what we need to do is we need to do a buyer agency agreement for 15 months so that I can basically ensure that I'm there to serve you throughout the entirety of the process, right? Because if somebody said I'm buying in a year, I would be the guy signing up a buyer agency agreement for 15 months. Wouldn't you like to have that? And then I would make sure that I tell them, look, whenever you go to an open house, or if you see any properties, you need to let them know that you have your own advocate, and I'm going to help you get the best deal, right? Because if they believe I'm going to help you get the best deal, they're going to come to us. If they think that you have to give out a card just so you get a commission, they're going to avoid you like the plague.
And stay in touch with them, right? So you do the agreement, but you stay in touch with them, because I have an agent right now that did that, and then just put them on a drip, and then they went Scooby-Dooing, that's what I call it when people drive around and look for, signs, ended up getting under like this literally just happened. And they didn't say that they came back to the agent and said they want out of the agreement, but what was the follow-up? What was the communication? Like, okay, he signed it and then just forgot about him. So we do have to stay in touch, and a lot of people, as soon as they know that they're going to be buying, they start looking, and they see the shop.
Nicole, what's the commission on that transaction, do you guess?
Not much. It was actually like a lower price point. It was like around 250, 285 or something.
So $6,000 or $7,000, right? So could you every week do a text or a 2-minute call until they buy? You could have, if it was important to you, right?
Sure, absolutely.
So again, like, I hate to be the person, who's saying that, it's our fault, but if the outcome's not what you want it to be, winners take accountability, losers cast blame.
Like you said, it's a learning experience. What could I have done differently? And the agent was like, well, we need to enforce my agreement and like lawsuits, and and I'm like, well, is it worth it? And I always feel like it's important to back up our agents. I do 110%, but where was the follow-up? And you just have to kind of weigh out what you're losing, what kind of skin you have in the game. Have you actually done anything?
And if that happened in New Jersey, that I might be unpopular, because I'd be like, you know what, I can get you better than a commission. You got a really valuable lesson, and it only cost you $6,000 or whatever that commission was, because the amount of time it's going to take to fight somebody, you can just go sell another house, right?
Yes, yeah.
That's my opinion. That's and don't get me wrong, I'm going to fight for you, but my opinion is, let's take the learning lesson from it instead of, playing the victim card.
Mm-hmm.
So it's 12:03. I hope this was valuable. I hope all these meetings kind of come together to give you a different mindset and different framework for success in the future. All right. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Ron. Have a great weekend.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.